Generation X was told to work hard, stay quiet, and figure things out alone. They were raised on independence, resilience, and the belief that complaining was a weakness. They survived recessions, layoffs, divorces, debt, and the slow disappearance of stable careers. And now, as they reach their 50s and early 60s, many are facing a question they never expected. What if retirement was never really waiting for them? They do not have the pensions many boomers had. They do not have the time millennials still have. They are still paying mortgages, helping adult children, and caring for aging parents. They did everything they were told to do, but the future they were promised may have quietly disappeared. Gen X did not simply grow older at the wrong time. They entered adulthood just as the old promise of retirement was being rewritten. For their parents, retirement often meant a pension, a company watch, and a predictable check after decades of loyalty. For Gen X, that bridge was already disappearing. Companies moved away from pensions and handed workers something very different, a 401k, a personal account tied to the market. Suddenly, retirement was no longer a promise. It became a calculation. How much could you save? How well could you invest? Could you avoid layoffs, recessions, medical bills, divorce, and debt long enough for compound interest to work? Gen X was told this was freedom. But freedom also meant risk. If the market crashed, it was your problem. If wages stalled, it was your problem. If you started late, borrowed early, or had to pause contributions to survive, it was your problem. They were not given a safety net. They were given a login password. And now, decades later, millions are discovering that the system they trusted may not have been built to protect them at all. It was built to transfer responsibility, quietly and permanently, onto them. The numbers behind Gen X retirement are not just disappointing. They are a warning sign. Millions have little or nothing saved for the years when work is supposed to stop. Some are still paying mortgages. Some are carrying credit card debt. Some are helping adult children who cannot afford to live on their own. Others are spending money, time, and energy caring for aging parents. On paper, many Gen Xers are in their peak earning years. But in real life, their income is being pulled in every direction. A retirement account may look like a personal failure when the balance is too small. But behind that number is a lifetime of interrupted plans. Layoffs, recessions, medical bills, divorce, inflation, and family emergencies all leave fingerprints. The crisis is not just how little they saved. It is how many times life forced them to start over. Gen X is often called the sandwich generation, but that phrase sounds too gentle. A sandwich does not capture what it feels like to be crushed from both sides. Above them are aging parents who need rides, medicine, money, paperwork, and patience. Below them are children, teenagers, or adult kids still trying to survive in an economy that keeps getting more expensive. And in the middle stands Gen X, exhausted, responsible, and quietly running out of room. Every decision becomes a trade-off. Pay the parent's medical bill or add money to retirement. Help a child with rent or reduce your own debt. Take time off for a hospital visit or risk losing hours at work. This is not the freedom they were promised. It is a life of constant triage. They are the emergency contact for everyone. The problem solver. The backup plan. The person who shows up when no one else can. But while they are holding families together, their own future is slipping further away. No spreadsheet captures the emotional cost. No retirement calculator measures the guilt of choosing yourself. For Gen X, family love has become a financial pressure point right when time is running out. For Gen X, retirement is not only a financial question. It is a question of identity. What happens when survival has been your personality for decades? This generation learned to keep moving, even when exhausted. They built lives around work, responsibility, and being needed. But retirement asks a terrifying question. Who are you when no one is depending on you? Who are you when the job title disappears? For some, stopping work feels like freedom. For others, it feels like becoming invisible. Money matters, but fear goes deeper than a balance. They fear illness, loneliness, irrelevance, and becoming a burden. They fear discovering that sacrifice did not buy peace. Because after a lifetime of holding everything together, Gen X is not just wondering if they can afford to retire. They are wondering who they become when the struggle finally stops. The advice sounds simple. If you have not saved enough, just work longer. Delay retirement. Delay Social Security. Keep earning, keep contributing, keep going. But for Gen X, that plan depends on something fragile. It assumes their body will cooperate. It assumes their employer will still want them. It assumes the economy will not break at the wrong moment. It assumes caregiving will not pull them out of the workforce. And it assumes burnout will not finally win. Working longer can help, but it is not a guarantee. A layoff at 58 can erase years of planning. A diagnosis can change everything in one phone call. An aging parent can suddenly need full-time care. A company can replace experience with cheaper labor or new technology. The most dangerous retirement plan is the one built on nothing going wrong. Gen X knows better than that. They have spent their whole lives watching things go wrong. Gen X anger is not loud. It usually arrives as sarcasm, silence, or a tired joke. They were told to be independent, then blamed for needing help. They watched companies cut pensions, raise expectations, and call it opportunity. They watched homes become more expensive, healthcare more fragile, and college debt follow their children home. They worked through recessions, restructurings, and endless promises that the economy would reward resilience. But resilience became another word for absorbing pain. Now many are looking around and asking why no one noticed. Boomers were studied, millennials were analyzed, Gen Z was debated, Gen X was expected to adapt. So the anger sits under the surface. Not because they want sympathy, but because they are tired of being the backup plan for a system that never planned for them. It is not rage without reason. It is the sound of a generation finally recognizing the pattern. So what now? For Gen X, the answer is not simple. Some will work longer, but not forever. Some will downsize, move, or redefine what retirement means. Some will build smaller lives with fewer illusions and more honesty. Maybe retirement will not look like golf courses, cruises, and endless leisure. Maybe it will look like part-time work, shared housing, later social security, and careful choices. But this crisis cannot be solved by personal discipline alone. A generation cannot budget its way out of a broken promise. Gen X needs better options, better healthcare, stronger protections, and a culture that sees them. They also need permission to stop carrying everyone in silence. The future may be smaller than they imagined, but it is not over. The question is no longer whether Gen X can retire like their parents. The question is whether they can create something different and call it freedom. Gen X was never supposed to ask for much. They were taught to keep going, even when the road disappeared. But retirement is forcing a question they can no longer ignore. What happens when the generation that carried everyone finally gets tired? What happens when independence becomes isolation? What happens when survival is no longer enough? Maybe Gen X will not retire the way their parents did. Maybe there will be no perfect ending, no clean escape, no easy reward. But there can still be honesty. There can still be reinvention. There can still be a future built with less silence and more truth. So if you are Gen X, the question is not just how much you saved. It is what you still want your life to mean. Because retirement is not only about leaving work behind. It is about deciding what part of you finally gets to live.